Hi everybody, it's Monica with American English with Monica. I'm so glad you're here. Let's talk about this weekend. Yeah, we use this a lot. We're American accent. We're constantly talking about the weekend. So I want you to know when you hear the expression this weekend, it can be used in the past when we're referring to the past. It can be used in the present, and it can be used in the future. This is really common. Now, I teach business English in the American accent, and one of the most common topics that coworkers discuss, especially at the beginning of the week or the end of the week, is the weekend. Yeah, you're going to want to hear this lesson. I'm so glad you're here. I also want to tell you that if you stay to the end of the video, I'm going to talk about some differences in American accent versus other English accents. For example, the British accent, they use some prepositions with weekend in a very different way. In the American accent, Americans wouldn't understand or wouldn't quite know what you're talking about because it sounds a little different. So let's get started. I made a few notes because I have a lot to discuss. Okay, so some notes for me. Here we go, weekend. Let's start with the definition. In America and some other Western cultures, Western societies, and some global societies, the weekend refers to Saturday and Sunday, the 2 days at the end of the week. It's typically 2 days that we rest, or we don't go to school, or we don't go to work. Now, this is not true for a lot of people. A lot of people still work on the weekends. And in some cultures around the world, school happens on Saturday, very naturally. So not everyone has a weekend to do things that they want to do. But I'm talking about in typical, general American work week of Monday through Friday. And even more typical is an 8-hour workday that's considered 9 to 5, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. That's very common. So that is what I'm referring to, the most common scenario for Americans when they talk about their weekend. They're usually not going to work or going to school. I understand it's different around the world. And if the weekend means nothing to you in your culture, I'd love to know in the comments. Or maybe just 1 day a week is set aside for rest or relaxation or some errands, things other than school or work. Some people have religious events on weekends, like a Saturday or a Sunday. I'm not religious, but I know there are a lot of religions in the world that consider either Saturday or Sunday a very special day. So this might sound familiar to you in your culture, and I'd love to know in the comments. But let's talk about the weekend and how we use the phrasing in America. I also want to point out the pronunciation, the way we say weekend with the American accent, okay? The first syllable is stressed. It's one word, 2 syllables, but in the American accent, this is the stronger syllable, the weekend, weekend. That's different in British English and other English accents around the world where you might hear, it's hard for me to say it differently. What did you do this weekend? Let's meet for dinner this coming weekend. It's so hard for me to say it like that, but I have heard that when I watch British TV shows, for example. But I teach the American accent, so I will be using the first syllable as the strong one, the weekend. Okay? Okay. And please note, I know I said this, but I'm going to repeat it. It's one word. It's wrong to have a space. So if you're preparing to take a test, some of you are preparing to take an English test and you have to write certain answers to questions or essays or letters, make sure when you're discussing the weekend, it's one word. Okay, now I have a few other things I want to talk about. We're going to talk about what prepositions to use. We're going to talk about common expressions, but let's talk about how this weekend can be used in the past, present, or future. Now, I mentioned I teach the American accent in business English. So these are common things that we say at the workplace, at the office. If you have a typical 9 to 5, Monday through Friday job, people often talk about their weekend. On Monday, the weekend is over, you're back at work, it's the first day of the work week for many people. We often will say to other people around us, "Did you have a nice weekend?" It's very common. It's like saying, "Hey, how are you? Did you have a good weekend? Did you have a nice weekend?" And you can just say, "Yeah, how about you?" We don't really need to know all the details of your weekend. Even if they ask, "What did you do this weekend?" What did you do? Past tense. On Monday, they're going to say, "What did you do this weekend?" But they're going to say it really fast. You're going to hear American accent and it will sound like, "What?" Instead of "What did you do this weekend?" they're going to say, "What'd you do? What'd you do this weekend? What'd you do this weekend?" So they're asking about your weekend. You can just say, "Not much," or "I relaxed," or "I visited family." Whatever you did, leave it to 1 or 2 words. They don't want a whole long explanation, even if you did something really fun. It's usually in the workplace, they're just asking to be nice. It's kind of a polite way to have a conversation. "Oh, did you have a nice weekend? What'd you do?" "Yeah, I relaxed, saw some family. How about you?" And they're going to say, "Yeah, I had a good weekend." So sometimes if you know the person a little bit better, or it's a friend that's asking, you can go into detail. "Yeah, I visited my uncle, and then I went to a concert, and I did some housework. Right? I had a good weekend. How about you?" But on Mondays, it's the past. They're talking about the weekend that just happened. Saturday and Sunday. What'd you do this weekend? How was your weekend? It's usually common on Mondays. Now, on Thursdays and Fridays, right? Now we're at the end of the week. We're about to have a weekend. Now we're going to use it in the future. What are you doing this weekend? Do you have any plans this weekend? You're going to hear this weekend about the upcoming weekend, the weekend that's about to happen. On Thursday or Friday, if someone says something about this weekend, they're probably not talking about the past. On Mondays, what'd you do this weekend? But on Thursday and Friday, they're probably going to ask you, what about this coming weekend? What do you have going on this weekend? What are you doing this weekend? Do you have any plans for the weekend? Now, I mentioned Monday. I mentioned Thursday and Friday, but what about the middle of the week? Tuesday and Wednesday. This is where you're going to hear both. They might ask you about the past weekend, or they might be asking you about the future weekend. And this is where we say a couple of other words in there to clarify. This is very common. Americans who are native speakers, they do this without even thinking. They clarify. They use some extra words, right? So on Tuesday or Wednesday, maybe some other days, but usually in the middle of the week, since this weekend could mean the past or it could mean the future, they're going to add some words probably. Like, what'd you do this past weekend? That means the weekend we just had, but they're asking you about the past. Or what are you doing this coming weekend? This coming weekend. The problem with the verbs, you're trying to listen for the past tense or future verbs. What are you doing? What are you doing? We're asking about the future. What did you do? We're asking about the past. The problem if you are an English learner and you're trying to listen for the verb, it's hard to hear because Americans speak so quickly, especially with common phrases. What'd you do this weekend? What are you doing this weekend? One's past and one's future. So this weekend, you're going to hear that a lot, and it's okay to clarify. Well, last weekend, let's pretend it's Wednesday. Last weekend, I visited family. This weekend, I'm just relaxing. So last weekend can mean the one we just had. But sometimes you have to clarify this past weekend or last weekend. These are both talking about the weekend we just had, the most recent weekend. If you're speaking during a weekday, Monday through Friday. Now, if you're talking to someone on a Saturday, you're in the middle of a weekend, then you'll use this past weekend or last weekend for the most recent weekend, but it's not the one you're in. Okay? Okay. If you're talking about the future and it's Wednesday, so you're not sure if they're asking about the past weekend or the upcoming weekend, they might say this coming weekend. What are you doing this coming weekend? Or what are you doing for the upcoming weekend? So I want to know if you've heard some of these in the American accent. Have you talked about your weekend plans with someone? I'd love to know in the comments, what are some ways that you've been asked about your weekend? Now, this weekend can also be used in the present because we might be talking on a Friday. Now, remember I said weekends are Saturday and Sunday? They are, but many people start their weekend as soon as work or school is over on Friday. So on Friday afternoon or Friday evening, we could be like, what are we doing this weekend? And we're talking about right now, the present weekend. Yeah. So the weekend technically is Saturday and Sunday, but often Americans start their weekend on Friday, 5 o'clock. It's very common. All the way till Monday when school or work begins. So if someone says they're traveling for the weekend, you might have to clarify what days, because maybe they're going to be gone just Saturday and Sunday, the weekend. But sometimes they extend it and they have a long weekend, a long weekend. That's an expression I wanted to tell you. I had it all written out. Saturday and Sunday often includes Friday nights, okay? And a long weekend is when we add an extra day off. Either Friday or Monday, maybe both. Maybe we're doing a 4-day weekend. But a long weekend is usually 3 days, and maybe you're taking that Friday off of work, or maybe Monday is there's no school or no work because of a holiday. So for the long weekend, maybe you're traveling or doing something fun or doing nothing, just relaxing on my long weekend. Okay? So we talked about this weekend, last weekend, the one that just happened, next weekend, the upcoming weekend, this coming weekend. We often say next weekend. But if we're talking about 2 weekends in the future or 2 weekends in the past, because maybe they said, oh, did I see you at a party last weekend or the weekend before last? We might use these expressions. The weekend before last means 2 weekends ago. Last weekend is the one we just had. The weekend before last is the one on the calendar before that. In the future, if we're talking about next weekend, I have to travel. Oh, wait, no, it's the weekend after next. The weekend after next. I do a video about how we talk about time with weeks, months, years, days, where I use these expressions quite a bit. I'll link it in this video so you know. If you haven't seen that one, I recommend you go and watch that. Okay? All right, let's keep talking about the weekend because I have some more to tell you. Okay. So I want to talk about prepositions that we use. Prepositions. We use an American accent. We use during the weekend. Okay. During the weekend, I'll be visiting my sister. Now that doesn't tell you what time or day. It's not the whole weekend, but during the weekend, at some point during the weekend, I'm going to see my sister. Okay? If it was the whole weekend, I would say this weekend I'm visiting my sister. It'd be all weekend. But during the weekend, my sister and I are going to get together. So during is one often. Over the weekend. Over. This is another common one. What are you doing over the weekend? What did you do over the weekend? Just asking how you spent your time over the days Saturday and Sunday. Or what are your plans over the weekend? That's future. What are your plans over the weekend? We're just asking. It's another way to say, what are you doing this weekend? Or what did you do last weekend? Over the weekend. Over the weekend, I did some gardening. Now, what if you do something regularly? Like every weekend, I work at my second job. Or every weekend, I visit my parents. If you do something continuously, in the American accent, we often say on. On the weekends, I visit my parents. Look at the plural. That means I'm telling you, on the weekends, I visit my parents. It's like a very natural habit that I do, something continuously. On the weekends, I like to relax. On the weekends, I don't like to make plans. That's what I like to do on the weekends. I like to relax, read some books, sleep in. Sleep in. Do you know that expression? I like to sleep in on the weekends. It means I don't get up at 5 in the morning. Maybe I sleep in, I stay in bed, maybe a little later, maybe 7 or 8 o'clock. So if you have a typical weekend or a one-day day at the end of your week, what do you like to do? What do you do on the weekends? I'd love to know. Now, we're toward the end of the video, and this is important because the British have a different word that they use. They use at the weekend. This is so strange for my ears, and it's hard for me to teach it. But I do want you to know when you watch certain movies or you hear people talk, they might say at the weekend. At the weekend. Let's have a meeting at the weekend. I like to go swimming at the weekends. Or at weekends, I travel often. This is British or other English accents around the world, not just England, British English, but other English accents, they might use the word at, but the American accent doesn't. And it sounds strange if you're typing an email to your colleague or your boss or your friend in the American accent. We would say, what do you like to do on the weekend? What do you like to do on the weekends? Usually it's plural when we use on. Or this coming weekend, what are you doing? But if it's British English, you might see at the weekend. Okay? Cool. I'd love to know if you have comments or questions. This is really fun to teach. The reason why I really want to talk about this is because I teach private classes to my students around the world. I love it. And often they have to communicate with Americans. Maybe they're in America from another country, or maybe they do business with American companies. And some of my students were confused when people ask about this weekend. They're like, Monica, are they talking about the future or the past? And I'm like, both. You have to listen to the verb or clarify. Maybe you can ask them, do you mean last weekend? I stayed home. But this weekend that's coming, I'm traveling. So this weekend is very common, and I'm so happy I got to talk about it with you. Let me know if you have any comments or questions or things you want to add. Maybe I missed something. And I want to remind you, I'm making these videos to help you. If you have a topic you really want to hear about, just put it in the comments. If you have a question about English, maybe you're a little embarrassed to ask, this is the right place. I'm not here to judge you. I'm here to help you. Some people find my email on my website and they email me a question privately. That's okay too. I'd love to hear what you have to say. I really want to know. And if you can like and subscribe and share my videos with your friends and colleagues that are also learning English, and maybe the American accent will help them. I teach without a script, so I'm speaking very naturally. If you want realistic English, keep coming to my videos. I appreciate it. But if you have a topic you want to hear about, let me know. All right, I hope you have a good weekend. I'll see you next time. Bye.